Hello and welcome to another episode of the Future Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Wells, joined today by co-host Dustin Myers. We are partners at Longitude, a hospitality branding and design group. At Future Hospitality, our goal is to interview the brightest minds in the industry, gathering insights, ideas, and inspiration to share with you. If you enjoy the podcast, please be sure to leave us a review. Thank you for your support. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Stephen Cham, co-founder at Eaglepoint Hotel Partners, partner at Sightline Hospitality, and vice chairman at the Independent Lodging Congress. During our discussion, we'll hear about the challenges and opportunities that have formed Stephen's path, his perspective on the value of independence as a property, and his team's approach to creating a unique narrative and story for each of their properties. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to dive into you and your background, what you guys have going on at Eaglepoint, and learn more about that. So before we jump into the conversation, would love to hear a little bit more about yourself, as well as Eaglepoint, and how kind of all this has kind of come together over the years.
Yeah, I grew up in the East Coast. My family started a restaurant business in Chinese restaurants, and started getting into hospitality at a very young age, working at my parents' restaurants, helping them out as a small business, and got into Cornell when I was finishing up high school, and wanted practical application of business, and got into the hotel school, and from there continued on to do hotels, doing appraisals for HVS, and then asset management for private equity funds, Walton Street Capital, and JMB Realty. Asset managing luxury hotels, primarily Four Seasons around the world, from Sydney to Scottsdale to Chicago, Seattle, and Milan. And then in 2005, I got hired away to work for a hospitality real estate platform that was backed by university endowments. So Yale, Harvard, and Princeton were lead investors. And that company was HEI Hotels out of Connecticut. And I joined their acquisitions group, and then ended up heading up that group up until about 2010, deploying over $1 billion of capital through 3 discretionary funds. And I really got the itch to create Eaglepoint, with a friend of mine who was also HVS and Cornell alum, Eric Warner. And we created Eaglepoint in 2010 in the midst of the worst recession at that point. And it's been now about 10 years since we started the company, and we've done over $700 million of investments with partners, anywhere from ground up development to value-added repositionings of hotels, to operating companies, 2 management companies, and a conference business.
That's a really cool story. It's interesting that you started even as a kid in your parents' restaurant. What do you think you learned at an early age that kind of helped you know that that's what you wanted to do with your life?
I saw how hard my parents worked. They worked basically 7 days a week, from kind of 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And, I was fascinated by kind of, the idea of hospitality, making people happy. And then also kind of, working hard to create something. And so kind of early on, the entrepreneurial bug was planted inside my head. It continues through this day.
Yeah, that's really cool. So kind of got that seed planted, and then went to school and worked for some really great companies, and cut your teeth in just various aspects, and then went out on your own and started Eaglepoint. And Eaglepoint you have more than just Eaglepoint, right? You've got a few other entities. Maybe give us some background on those and how that all came about.
Sure. Yeah, Eaglepoint is the real estate investment platform. We're primarily GP capital alongside institutional LP capital that invests in value add hospitality plays. A classic deal would be, buying a hotel in Napa Valley, heading in renovation repositioning dollars with a plan and vision, and then executing that. And we've done about almost 24 investments via that vehicle. Another entity that we are partners with, a good friend of ours, Andrew Benioff, conceived of the Independent Lodging Congress, ilcongress.com, that focuses on boutique and lifestyle hospitality conferences. And it's been a labor of love. Andrew's really kind of dedicated himself to it. And we joined on after the first event that he had in Philadelphia. That's hence the Congress element of it. And it's really grown tremendously. We were up to doing 6 events in 2020. We had our New Orleans event, which is a confab, and it then ended up, it happened, and then the next one was supposed to be in May, and that ended up getting canceled because of COVID. We went to 100% digital to, continue to build a presence there, and it worked out phenomenally well, growing our base. And then we just had our first confab post-pandemic in Philadelphia in June, and we're looking forward to having our second one in Brooklyn in September 14th, and then our major event, our annual event in Miami in October. So that's the conference business, and it's really grown tremendously. Both prior to the pandemic and even during the pandemic. And then the third company we have is Sightline Hospitality, which is a boutique and lifestyle hospitality management company that manages boutique hotels as well as branded hotels on behalf of some of Eaglepoint's investments, as well as our partners' investments, and as well as for third parties. And that's based in San Francisco. With a team across the United States. And so through those different platforms, we don't have to, have investment opportunities solely with our hotel management company, but certainly helps to have a group that thinks similar to us and sees the business similar to us.
That's really fascinating how integrated you are into various aspects of the industry. I'd love to kind of unpack that a little bit more as far as the journey that you went through and the strategic decisions to not only form obviously Eaglepoint, but get involved with the ILC and Sightline, and what was that like at a high level?
Yeah, ILC was an idea that really felt had resonance with us, in that we think about how we, in being in the industry, how do we push it forward? What are innovations? What are things we can do? We admire folks who have preceded us, right? Whether that's Bill Kimpton or other pioneers like Chip Connolly starting his Robert Eve, or Ian Schrager. And we think about, they created lasting legacies, right? And not to say that we're anywhere close to those giants, but how do we get our ideas and create this kind of somewhat white space, and how do we move the industry forward? And that was our inspiration for ILC, and do it in a way that's not your traditional suit and conference room and boring dry stuff, but talk about ideas and innovation. And we really looked at TED conferences as a source of inspiration, coupled with design conferences that hotel design does, and as well as still the investment side. So it's kind of a unique melding of hanging out with some of your best friends in the industry, as well as sharing creative new ideas, as well as meeting new people that you wouldn't have normally come across. And so we think that's a really exciting moment for our space. and it really creates meaning. I think the folks who have attended our conferences just rave about it and love the intimacy of it, and it's really exciting to to connect with them. And also, we think it also has added benefit to our other platforms in that you get some new ideas or you make new connections, and you are part of the thought leadership in moving ideas forward. And so it has mutual kind of benefits through these interdependencies, interconnections.
Yeah, we're looking forward to attending our first ILC event in Miami this year. So maybe we'll see you there.
Oh, that'd be great. And I just want to add is that, that's one of the fascinating things about our industry is that, even though it spans the globe, it's small enough that you could fit everybody, in a 2,000 person ballroom. I mean, there's more people than that, but having attended conferences for the last 2 decades in our industry, you get to see people. And, if you're in the high tech industry, I don't think you'd have that same level of connections and relationship. And that's what makes hospitality so special. It is inherently built in to have these connections and and having that warmth. And then, but knowing people over decades is an appreciation that I've built up attending these events.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of circling back to Eaglepoint, like, this idea of value add hospitality, and, you mentioned that you're involved with acquisitions, repositioning of properties, and then the actual execution and management of the properties oftentimes too. So could you kind of speak to maybe some examples of projects you've been a part of over the years that maybe you've have been most formative for your group, or maybe some challenges you faced and how you guys have overcome those?
Yeah, I'd love to share about how we created the Arlo hotels in New York City with our partners, because Eaglepoint was there from inception all the way to today, where we are, attending ownership meetings and asset management review meetings. And those were 2 ground-up hotel projects conceived in 2012. Just a piece of paper, and our partners at the time was GLO Capital, and they approached us to find a capital partner to develop the land. It was actually one parcel at the time, which was Midtown, which is Arlo Nomad, which is on 31st Street between 5th and Madison. And that property has about 255 rooms, very vertical, very narrow site. And a friend of ours conceived the idea of, we should do a micro room product there. Micro room product is similar to like a Yotel and Citizen M. And it was an emerging category, and it still is somewhat of an emerging category. And we ran with it and really helped put together the team that created the personality that ultimately ended up being the Arlo Hotels. And that involved Averco and actually Matt Goodrich, who you've had on your podcast, and is a dear friend of ours, was the head of the group in charge of our Arlo Hotel. And it was great to listen to his podcast and talk about how design inspiration of the college that in the middle of the U.S. Inspired him to come up with the communal aspects of the hotel and the ethos of it. And so really fun and challenging project to take something that is just on paper and then making it come to life. And we did that at the Arlo Nomad, and then subsequently, almost concurrently, the Arlo Soho, which was 325 keys off of Canal and Hudson Square neighborhood, and on Hudson. And that was a completely different project in that one is about 10 stories versus Nomad is 31 stories. But they share the same vernacular of having kind of communal lobby experiences, having a courtyard area, having a ground floor restaurant, and then having second floor meeting rooms, and then on the rooftop having a very activated rooftop experience, and then small guest rooms in between, with very few suites, and having the guest room itself. You enter in and you're essentially in the bathroom area, and then you proceed further and you're in the sleeping area, and then you have a very large format window that is almost nearly from floor to ceiling and also from wall to wall. And the idea of that was germinated through many, many discussions with our architecture group and interior design group of how do we create a box or room that doesn't feel so small, even though physically it is. They're about 150 square feet on average, which is pretty small, but make it feel like it's much more. And the ethos was, you're in Manhattan, and you want to, have a great experience. But what is the most important aspects of being in a guest room? It's having a great sleep experience, a great shower experience, and a place that you can do some work or watch TV. And so we made sure that we executed very well in those three regards, and everything else was a bit secondary. Meaning that we didn't need the extra space to have a massive sitting area. We didn't need a closet that hardly anyone used. We didn't need to have unnecessary services like room service. So we focused on those three things really well. We made sure we had a great sleep experience, a great shower, and television and kind of a seating area. And then we focused our energies of, well, if you're in Manhattan, you're going to be out, of 24 hours, you'll be sleeping 8 hours, and the other 10 hours, you're probably going to be out and about exploring the city or working. And the other handful of hours, you might be in your room, but we want to try to get you away from your room and into our rooftop space or in our restaurant or in our public areas. And so we're going to devote the rest of our energies into creating those great spaces, align ourselves with partners with similar vision, and create a great urban hotel. And I think we achieved those. If you go on to arlohotels.com, you could see that it's very activated in very communal public areas.
Yeah, it looks really incredible. Next time we're in the city, we'll definitely have to check that out. Really, a lot of the projects that you guys are putting out are just really inspiring, and it's been really cool to watch. Are you guys in active growth mode? Are you acquiring new properties, building? What does that look like kind of on the other side of this pandemic?
Yeah, we are. We have working on a couple of projects that I can't go into too much detail on some of them, but we're pursuing a hotel in Southern California that is just under 200 rooms. Hopefully in a couple months, I can share more about that one. That's really exciting. We're doing a ground up development project in a coastal area of California, in the Bay Area, that will be pretty amazing in that it combines kind of live, work, play, stay in a very California experience, California living experience, meaning that the indoors and outdoors are very integrated. In that, I live in California, by the way. I live in Oakland, and what I love living in California is we have just phenomenal climate, and people's residences are very rarely like they eat outside. They have amazing experiences, wining, dining, entertaining outside, and that we're extending that experience into a hotel format, and this project was conceived or developed during COVID. And so we incorporated elements in our design that reflect the ability to open all the doors of our lobby to the outside, to have a ballroom that on each end, this is about a 3,000 square foot ballroom, on each end opens completely with fold away doors. So you can have open air experience, and it spills out into this lawn area that then overlooks the river. And so, it's probably one of the first few with COVID in mind designed hotel experiences. In terms of adjusting for a post-pandemic future, which I think is, going to be with us for some time, unfortunately.
Awesome. Yeah. So you guys obviously know what you're doing, and you have incredible portfolio of properties that you have been involved in. I'd love to hear a little bit more, and you've already kind of touched on some of the ethos regarding the Arlo Nomad is, kind of elevating the basics and keying into what guests really want and making that a really exceptional experience for them. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more kind of about your ethos and methodology when approaching new developments as well as repositioning properties, how you guys approach that from a branding, storytelling, and narrative experience to create that guest experience, and kind of how you guys focus in on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We approach when we look at an existing opportunity, whether that's an existing hotel or a new build, we try not to come in with preconceived, this is our strike zone or this is our box and we're going to plant it here and rinse and repeat. We look at it as, okay, here's a fresh opportunity. Whether it's an existing hotel, I'm looking at a deal in downtown San Francisco right now. It's like, okay, what could it be refashioned into? What worked? What didn't? What is the customer telling us? It starts first with the consumer and the customer. And from there, we then build up or build back from there and says, okay, well, if we put more dollars here in renovating, reposition it, where do we think we'll go? If we focused on digital efforts or marketing, that's a really fun and challenging part of our business, is that it's not, even though it's specialized within hospitality, there's so many different ways to approach or tackle a project. Sometimes it's all about operation and execution, and other times it's about renovation or reposition, and other times it's about financial management. And so there's not one kind of solution, but we start with the customer first, because if you can't address your customer's needs or what they're looking for or what their pain points are, the rest almost doesn't matter. And we try not to go, oh, well, this should be a Hilton Garden Inn or this has to be a Courtyard, because we're not tied to that, right? We generally skew to lifestyle, but that doesn't, we would just as readily do a branded hotel if it made the most sense. So we're really agnostic as to brand. We think that we can control our destiny a bit more if we go toward independent route, and it certainly leaves us more optionality on exit when we reposition something as independent, and then they can sell it to more institutional holder that says, a REIT or a fund that says, I want to put a brand on it because we have this strategic relationship. And that's great, but it doesn't encumber us. But then on other opportunities where we're looking at a development project in Oahu, in an emerging area outside of Waikiki, and it 100% makes sense to work with a brand and do it with a brand. So I don't want to pigeonhole ourselves and saying we're only doing boutique and lifestyle hotels, but we see that there's more flexibility by going that route. Certainly it's more harder because you're creating these kind of one-offs, kind of like it's a bit more custom than, a traditional cookie cutter template approach.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Just starting with the customer, figuring out what they want, what they need, and not coming in with an idea of like, oh, we think this would be cool here, but really listening and making smarter decisions based on that. And then with the independent approach, being able to create the exact experience that you guys think is going to work, and just the flexibility and the customization there.
Yeah, and I'll add to that in that it helps that, my first job out of school was working for HVS for Suzanne Mellon in San Francisco. And, HVS is the preeminent appraisal evaluation firm. And, working for Steve Rushmore and Suzanne in the 90s was a seminal moment for me, because I get to travel around the country looking at all types of hotels, from extended stays to casinos to resorts to urban hotels. And I got to see what really worked and what clicked and what didn't click. And it also through the rigors of appraisal, you would do a market study and you do a valuation. You get, and obviously walk and talk and meet with folks in the market and see hotels. You start to understand the nuances and really kind of break down in a granular fashion segmentation of the market, and start to say, hey, this market, in West Oahu, where we're doing a development deal, we look at that as like, who is the customer there? And really kind of say, oh, there's a military component, there's inter-island component, and there is the international traveler component. And once you kind of understand those dynamics, you really then can apply, okay, what are they looking for? And we're like, well, we want outdoor experiences. They want a great pool experience. They want a great barbecue experience. And like in terms of a barbecue setup, like a lanai that they can actually entertain. And so we're building that into the story of how we can see this hotel be a branded hotel and really kind of speak to their needs as a customer and consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. We were recently in Jackson and got the opportunity to see the Anvil, and just what a cool property that is. I'm curious little more from the creative and brand storytelling side. Maybe just kind of reverse engineer what that process looks like, and does it look different every time? Do you guys have a formula that you kind of follow? What does that look like with your team?
Yeah, it is a great example of Anvil and our Sandview properties and Calsto Motor Lodge, and it starts with the product and the market, and then from there, we seek out like-minded designers and branding people who we kind of look at, like, Eric and I have a discipline of, we're very quantitative, from our HVS days and looking at assessing markets and risk and all that. But then there is a whole personal interest of culture and where things are going, and we look at where trends are, where people are gravitating to, and we kind of build that into what we're doing to create. And it's not necessarily just dollars and cents. It's also, because it's a good for the community and a good for the consumer and customer, the guest. And so we find like-minded people in our team. We have a kind of a skeletal framework of a business plan, not fully fleshed out, but at least a general narrative that we say, hey, this should be, we've assessed the market and we think it should be this type of positioning because the consumer is looking for these value-added factors that's not currently met in the market. And then we add in layers by layer, and then we think about how we can create more value. And then we try to bring in partners both on the execution side as well as on the investment side that are aligned. And through that alignment, we then continue to push the team to orchestrate an execution of that vision. So it's a really team-based approach, and we got a chance to work with some really creative groups, from folks at Studio Tech, which is now Post Company, to Avroco, to Goodrich, to Army of Moon people, some of just the best minds out there in the space. And so we're super excited. And those are also partners that we tried to work and it didn't work quite as well. And, it's for some reason or other, it isn't always a success every time. But I've realized through these projects and these opportunities that if you have alignment with the team, that you really work well together, it makes all the rough patches so much more smoother. I mean, every deal will have a rough patch, whether that's external or internal. But it's the people that's on your boat that makes the difference, because I've had deals where everything's very good financially, but I have partners that are very, combative, or, they don't see the same way. And it just makes it so much more harder to execute, even if it's, not a big issue. Versus I've had other partners, our Portland project, which is now the Huxton Hotel. We have phenomenal partners from day one. in the Nato family, Bob and Will Nato, and they've been just tremendous, great gentlemen to work with. And we went through rough patches in developing, constructing the hotel, but those issues were minor because we're always on the same team and always on a positive view of how we can solve the issue, and just made the world a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the end product is very inspiring. So kudos on that.
Thank you.
What are some of the societal changes that you've seen over time? You mentioned that you've recently been designing your first kind of post-pandemic hotel and guest experience. What are some of the shifts that you've seen over your years in the industry, and where do you see that going?
That's a great question. Pre-pandemic, I already saw, and this is probably, not a surprise, not a revelation or anything like that, but it's, we saw that through ILC that there was something there in doing independent and lifestyle hospitality. And this was about 7 years ago. And we're like, hey, there's something there. It's interesting, and then kind of the whole influencer movement and the creative elements have flourished. And I think that's only going to accelerate because I think people want to seek a deeper meaning of what they're in what they work in, what they live for. This pandemic has only made it more of a revelation to everybody in that they want something more meaningful in their lives rather than just increasing their bank balance or just getting a bigger house or anything like that, nicer car. But it's about like, what is the deeper meaning of life? What is it that we want to be here for? How do we want to spend our time? And who do we want to spend it with? And that gives me great joy that people are thinking that way. But the most important attribute that I find very valuable in my interactions is that person thoughtful? Has that person thought about what they're saying and what they're doing and how they're approaching their life? And I benefit tremendously from people who think like that, and I'm thankful for it. And being thoughtful can be represented in so many different ways, right? But it's just that the attention to care and how they convey themselves. And so, I think it's only accelerated in the pandemic, and I think people are going to be more creative, going to be more thoughtful, going to spend their times more with their loved ones than they ever did before because they realize how precious life is. And so as a hospitality person, hotelier, it gives me satisfaction because I can create spaces that represent that, right? That, especially in the independent side, that, it's not necessarily another Hampton Inn or Courtyard Hotel, but that it's a space where, wow, they had a great experience at Kelso Motor Lodge in front of our wood burning fire, and had s'mores with their son or daughter. That is a special moment that they'll probably carry with them and they'll remember. And so that's where I derive satisfaction from. And I think it's only going to accelerate in that the challenges with doing independent lifestyle is that there is very little institutional support for it. It's starting to change. There's more players coming in, but they naturally, through risk aversion, prefer a branded experience because they know what a Marriott Courtyard is or a Hilton Garden Inn is. No offense to Marriott or Hilton, but it's a very standardized product, and they know, and there's less risk. It's much harder to execute an Anvil or a Kelso Motor Lodge because it doesn't fit any standard box. And so you don't have as much folks providing financing and providing support for that. But that's really where society is going to. And I think over time, the institutional markets and what we're seeing in the crypto space and NFTs and those type of things, that artists and creators who would always struggle, right? The starving artist, this is completely true. Up until the last few years, would never get recognized for their efforts. They would always get, passed on to the next owner of that artwork, and they would die penniless. But now you're seeing through NFTs, and I don't know if you follow that space too much, but it's the artists start finally getting recognition, and they're able to benefit from that when they sell in the future. And the reason why I'm talking about this tangent of crypto and NFTs is that it's giving the power back to creators and the innovators in the space, even though it's just in art right now. It's eventually going to spread into other areas and probably into real estate in the not too distant future. And so that's why it's like interesting, because then it starts getting institutional support for these kind of one-offs or independent platforms that previously had such a headwind to get through the traditional sources of getting a project done through traditional financing.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about the creativity that comes with financing and funding a project like an independent or lifestyle hotel. And I love how you're thinking about it with that kind of innovative mindset. I think you're spot on with, where society is heading, where travelers' needs and expectations are heading, for more of these like unique experiences and these meaningful moments. And I 100% agree that, valuing the creators is only going to continue to grow. So I'm really eager to see how that plays out in hospitality. I think you said it best earlier when you were talking about, you just always been fascinated by making people happy. And I think that at its roots, hospitality is kind of pretty much that's in its simplest form. That's the simplest way to put it, I think, is just like that idea of thoughtfulness, caring. Would you agree, or what would you add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, in this pandemic's made me think about, my life and what I focus on, how I want to spend my time. And I'm sure everybody's had that in the last year. And you look back and like, well, at the end of your life, what do you have? You have your experiences, and your experiences are a collection of memories. And your memories are created from a sense of place and a sense of moment. And then you think about what are those moments, right? Whether that's just like having a phenomenal meal by yourself, overlooking a beautiful setting, or it could be sharing a moment with a parent or a child or significant other, and hospitality in its most fundamental form creates all those moments, right? Whether that's a restaurant or a resort or a hotel. Or it could be, you're about to get married, right? And you're nervous and you're about to open the door. You're probably in the hotel. And so all those moments are like, I remember the kind of seminal moments of my life. And it's like, most of the time it's with loved one or in a setting where, sharing a meal or having a great time. And so that I derive a lot of satisfaction for creating those spaces, places and spaces for people.
Yeah. And like you were mentioning earlier, I think there's just been a leveling of the playing field for these brands, for these expressions, for art. You mentioned NFT and I mean, YouTube, and just really everything that's evolving out of the internet and the more lateral communication is just opening up a lot of really cool possibilities. The last question we like to ask, similar to the title of this podcast, is just as you look to the future of our industry, what are you most excited about?
I'm really excited that the people are starting to be more mindful of how they want to spend their time. And I think there's going to be a shift away from, just running through the motions of a business meeting or just, I've got to do my sales calls, right? Those are going to be relegated more to Zoom meetings because it's procedural. I think on the business travel side, it'll be more about relationship building, more experiential, more meaningful connections to maintain those business relationships. So I don't think business travel will die at all. I think it'll shrink a bit and convert themselves more toward, experiential. And then on the leisure side, I think people will seek deeper connections, right, when they're in their travels, and that all leads to experiential and sense of place. And that really is phenomenal for independent and boutique resorts and properties. And then on the associate front, in the labor side, you're seeing kind of this shortage of hospitality positions being filled, because I think people have other options these days, and they're realizing that, hey, we should be getting paid better for what we're doing. And there's a recognition for that. And so I'm excited in that I think the silver lining of the pandemic is that it made people more thoughtful and considered in their approach, and that it's going to push further innovation and creation, entrepreneurship into that space, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the future is bright. I'm excited to watch as you guys continue to just pour into the industry. I'm personally thankful for your involvement in ILC and just what an organization that is, and just a great benefit to the industry. So thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you in Miami in October, and see where it goes from there.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to do this podcast and sharing my time with you, and look forward to seeing you in Miami for sure.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Future Hospitality Podcast. If you enjoyed today's topic and episode, please leave us a review. If you'd like to learn more about Longitude, you can visit longitudebranding.com to see our portfolio of design work, read our Insights blog, and learn more about our team. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for Longitude Branding.